This morning, the ending moratorium on evictions. San Antonio Mayor Ron Nierenberg is with us on the failed effort to extend it in his city and what would happen to the Riverwalk there if conventions remain canceled for the next year. Tomorrow, the governor is set to open more businesses and just maybe allow already open businesses to admit more customers. We know what class sizes will potentially look like if students return to school this fall. New information from the superintendent of one of the state's largest districts. Plus, free coronavirus tests have led to expensive medical bills for some Texans. And why has wearing face masks become such a partisan issue?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good morning. We have a lot to get to across the state. Let's first, though, get you caught up on some political headlines this weekend. Tomorrow, Governor Greg Abbott will announce another group of businesses that can reopen. He could also let some businesses that are already open start admitting more customers. Gyms and office buildings are among those that can officially unlock their doors tomorrow. Bar owners and live music venues, though, they are pushing hard to be next. Another legal win for voting by mail during this pandemic. A state appeals court in a 2-to-1 ruling upheld a lower court's order that allows Texans to vote by mail if they are worried about getting the coronavirus. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, though, is now asking the Supreme Court to issue an opinion. Legal steps to stop the bullet train just got sidetracked. The 13th District Court of Appeals said that Texas Central, it can operate as a legitimate railroad. And that means it can use eminent domain and pay someone fair land value to use their property for the tracks. Opponents, though, vow to go to the Supreme Court. All right, 2 dates to keep track of right now. In about a week, we should know whether children can physically attend summer camps. And in the next month, we should have an official decision about what schools will look like this fall. That's where we begin this morning with the superintendent of Dallas ISD, one of the state's largest. Dr. Michael Hinojosa is here. Good morning to you, Dr. Hinojosa.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
How confident are you that parents will know something about summer camps in a week or so in the fall semester in the next month?
I think it's extremely critical, so I think people are going to make those decisions right away. We already know about summer school, but summer camps are different since they're outside, and it is for helping take care of children, so I think we'll know pretty soon.
Obviously, this is pretty fluid. Do you have an internal date you're working on to notify?
Well, yes, we'll communicate with the parents almost immediately, but we're really looking to August. We need to know by June 15th what the rules of engagement are so we'll know which plan to go with.
Since the situation does change daily with the public health response, at this point, how confident are you that students will physically go to a school in some form or fashion this fall?
I'm 75% confident. I don't think it'll be business as usual, but I also don't think it's going to be the current state. I think it's going to be a variation of that, and that's why we're working on at least 4 different plans depending on what the rules are and how we can execute.
The rules provided by the state. You know, Dr. Hinojosa, one parent asked me a great question, and I want to ask you the same question here. If a mom or dad is not comfortable sending their child back to school, will you make remote learning accommodations for that child?
Absolutely. In fact, we're sending out a survey this next week to all parents. We want to know that information. Even if we're open, if you do not feel comfortable sending your child back, please communicate with us and we will make accommodations for that. We do also know that the commissioner is going to give us permission to be able to get funding for that student. So we're preparing for that right away.
Do you think that the district might lose any students, or do you think it might gain any students from private schools?
I think we might gain from private schools. A lot of people are really taking a financial hardship right now, and the Dallas schools are improving. And so we're always looking at our market share, and we expect that we hope that we will attract more students.
I want to talk about high school for a moment, Dr. Hinojosa. Since high school will likely look different, will there be sports this fall and extracurricular activities that so many students look forward to?
I'm sure there will be sports. I just don't know there'll be sports in August. Maybe volleyball can start on time. Football, who knows? There's such a contact sport. There may have to be a variation. You know, right now we have 7-on-7 football. At least that's something. But we really have to wait for UIL to give us direction, University Interscholastic League, as to how we operate sports. But it is an important part of schooling, and it is one of our goals to make sure every student's involved in an extracurricular activity.
And like all districts, Dr. Hinojosa, I realize that there are a lot of plans up in the air, but with some of the numbers that I have seen for class sizes, maximum class sizes this summer, maybe 11 students. maximum class sizes this fall, 17 students. Does that sound about right? Is that something that's being discussed?
Well, that's actually accurate for the summer. We can have no more than 11 bodies in a classroom at any time. And for the fall, we know that under the current distancing rules, we could only have 17 students inside a classroom. So those numbers are accurate under the current rules. We'll see what the rules tell us, and then we'll adjust from there.
Obviously, a lot of people are concerned about staying in their homes and things like that. Does the district expect to lose money because of this? And if so, how prepared is the district to potentially furlough or lay off any employees?
Well, we're different from the city. We don't depend on sales tax revenue, and we're different from the state. We don't depend on old tax revenue. So we're fine. We're in good shape for 15 months. The rest of this year, the next school year. Now, after that, all bets are off. Yeah. But even after that, we have a very healthy fund balance or a reserve account. So we could live off of that reserve account for a couple of years. So we're in much better shape than most people.
That's good to hear. Obviously, it's the property taxes which really help fund the schools. Last thing, we have 20 seconds left here, Dr. Hinojosa. What keeps you up at night?
Well, I'll tell you what, just trying to figure out how we take care of our students with the greatest need, trying to make sure that they have what they need to be successful is really probably the greatest challenge that I have that keeps me up at night. All right.
Good to talk to you, and good luck to you in the coming weeks. Dr. Michael Hinojosa from Dallas ISD.
Thank you, Jason.
Let's back up now for a wider view. Back in March, when shelter in place really began, the governor let county judges, you see here, take the lead. It made sense. At the time, we had isolated areas with the virus with a growing number of cases. But fast forward a couple of months, and the governor is asserting his authority. The attorney general is sending letters to local authorities, and suddenly the familiar partisan lines of local control are crystal clear again. Let's head to Austin right now, and Ross Ramsey, the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well. These skirmishes over COVID restrictions are just the latest. There's also voting by mail, and one place in the state wanting to opt out of the state restrictions altogether.
Right. El Paso said that they've still got cases rising out there, and they're not ready to open things up and ask for an out. Ask the governor, go ahead and do your statewide order, but release us from it. This is basically people trying to assert local authority, they say, because of local conditions. The governor thinks that a statewide solution is now appropriate, although at the beginning of the pandemic, he was saying, the local controls, the local remedies are probably better right now.
The Trib also did a story that was pretty interesting about Texans who have asked for free coronavirus tests and have ended up with expensive medical bills. How in the world is this working?
Well, they're going to private testing, and sometimes the private testing say, well, we've got to rule out the flu, and we've got to rule out a cold and all of these other things. So they end up doing a bunch of other tests that aren't required for the COVID test. The COVID test is free, but they pile on all these other things, and people get surprisingly large bills. Sometimes, numbers with commas in them, big bills.
Wow, that's good advice. Ross, thanks. Back to you in just a moment. Coming up, San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg is with us on his city's failed attempt to help renters and what would happen to the Riverwalk if conventions don't return for a year or more. And economic anxiety has become a flashpoint for partisan politics. Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson with a message this morning for those who think restrictions might be ruining them. You're watching Inside Texas Politics. A question for you this morning. Have you been back to a restaurant dining room yet? What would it take to get you to book a hotel room? Well, businesses are discovering there's a lot of psychology involved in reopening. Even robots are involved. A San Antonio company makes robots that can disinfect rooms with UV light. The state capitol has one, and so does a Houston hotel. It can kill the coronavirus, but it's also supposed to make you feel safer about being there. The psychology of the virus is the topic of the latest Y'all-ticks political podcast. You can scan that QR code with your phone's camera. It will take you directly to this latest episode. Pause the screen here for a moment if you need to. And while you're there, take a moment and subscribe to Y'all-ticks as well. The state's moratorium on evictions ends in a little more than a week. San Antonio tried but failed to extend it locally there, but the Alamo City is trying to figure out something else. Will people crowd back onto the Riverwalk if conventions are not allowed for months or maybe more? With us this morning is San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg. Mayor, thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Jason.
Mayor, you lead arguably the biggest tourist destination in the state, but if conventions are the last thing to return, and that's, by all accounts what we're hearing from the governor's office, if they don't return for a year or more financially, what does that do to the city of San Antonio?
It's tough. Just like every other community, our hotel occupancy taxes have been devastated. And function of that, obviously, are these large events that come to the community, conferences, conventions, that sort of thing. But we do know that we're being guided by the best health data that we can get, and we also know that mass gatherings were the first things that we had to restrict, so likely they will be the last things that are loosened up. We would want to do that locally, and I'm sure that that's what the state is thinking as well. In the meantime, though, we're focusing on best practices, ensuring that those businesses that do open up can implement proper physical distancing and infection control measures. And the same goes for our ability to open up some of the events that we're used to. Don't think it will be a year, but we'll wait and see based on the health data and making sure that when we do begin those activities, they can be done safely and thoughtfully.
Mayor, let's hope it's not a year. Restaurants, though, are obviously only at 25% capacity if they are open for their dining rooms. Hotel occupancy is at 25%, we're hearing in San Antonio. The city has, a $200 million budget shortfall, furloughed 300 employees. At this point, do you think the city is going to have to make further cuts?
That's an ongoing discussion, but we have been proactive, and the furloughs that took place were done to basically allow for cash flow to get us through these intervening months. San Antonio has been one of the strongest fiscally managed cities in the country. That is true during normal times, and that certainly gives us some ability to manage through crises. And so we're going to be leaning on that. But, we don't know exactly, no city knows where the ground is on this. And we're going to be leveraging every opportunity we have to get people back on their feet, both within the community, but also within the city organization as well.
The moratorium on evictions ends on the 26th of the month. The council there in San Antonio narrowly rejected something similar that might have addressed this. What do you think is going to happen on the 26th, 27th, or the 1st of June when this moratorium ends?
Yeah, and to be clear, the council has stood in solidarity with our county. We've been quite a team working together, and the county has put a stay on evictions through the 18th. We'll see what happens in terms of the next level of that, if there's an extension. What we worked to do on the previous council meeting was to create a right to cure, basically requiring landlords to provide, before a notice to vacate, a period of time for tenants who are in arrears to get back up to good standing within their rents. We tried for a 60-day right to cure, similar to some other communities that had passed it. That was rejected based on some arguments about legal challenges to that. But the truth of the matter is that is just one tool, and we are going to leverage every tool, including those that we've been collaboratively working with the landlord community on, including rental assistance, et cetera, to make sure that nobody gets put out on the street. What happens on June 1st is that you're going to continue to see us leverage these programs, because our vision, our mission, and my charge as mayor is to make sure that people who are impacted by COVID-19 aren't being put out on the streets because of it. We want to make sure that people have a safe roof over their heads.
A quick shout out, Mayor. Your website, askron.org, is pretty informative, so I appreciate that and the links that it has to the city. And if anyone has questions, obviously that's a good place to go. San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberger, appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Jason.
And now to Dallas, where the mayor revealed a statistic last week that caught our attention. Only 2% of people in this county have gotten a coronavirus test. That means 98% do not know if they have or have already had it. If we don't have the data, can we really respond? Let's start right there this morning with Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson. Mayor, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
We're doing well. We appreciate the time. Less than 2% of Dallas County or Dallas County's residents have been tested for the coronavirus. You said you don't want to finger point in an op-ed, but at the end of the day, whose responsibility is this to make sure Dallas residents get tested?
Well, I think the way to look at this is who is best suited to deliver the testing that we need. The federal government is probably in the best position to put in place a broad-based testing regime to make sure that everyone who needs a test gets a test. But at this point, I'm willing to step up as the mayor and try to do what we can at the city level to increase the testing that's going on, because 2% is just not quite enough.
I want to ask you something the city manager said. The Dallas Morning News reported that the city manager, T.C. Broadnax, said that more tough decisions are ahead. To me, that means that there's a possibility of more furloughs and potentially layoffs. What do you read into that? What should people who work for the city potentially expect?
I don't think you have to do much reading into it to know that that is a possibility. The city manager and the finance staff has told me and told the council and now has made public that all of these options have to be on the table. It's just the reality of the situation that money is going to be in short supply. We are going to be looking at maybe a $25 million shortfall in this current budget, and next budget we're looking at possibly up to 130 or so million shortfall, and we have to make tough decisions. I'm going to make sure, and I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that those cuts, if cuts are necessary, they probably will be, are equitable across the city government and in terms of services that we provide to our constituents. So equal is not always equitable. We want to make sure that what we do is equitable.
Mayor, let me ask you two parts of that. Number one, how many potential positions could be on the chopping block, if you will? And number two, what kind of timeline are we looking at here?
That really is something that the city manager is going to have to speak to. The city manager is going to have to look at our payroll from top to bottom, our organizational structure. We have a council manager form of government. We will have our say as the city council, and I will have my say as the mayor, but ultimately the city manager is going to have to make the recommendation to us as to how he thinks we can most equitably apply any cuts that we need to apply to our budget.
And when do you expect that you'll get something, or council will get something from the city manager?
We are going to be briefed in a few weeks, I believe in mid-June, from our chief financial officer on a proposed budget.
I want to ask you about Congress as well, too, because more money from the feds is kind of hung up in D.C. with politics there. Dallas has already spent the $14 million in rental assistance that came through the CARES Act. No idea, obviously, when or if Congress is going to approve more money. Should Dallas consider a moratorium on evictions after the state moratorium expires?
We have passed an ordinance here at the city level to give more time for private landlords and tenants to work out an arrangement to make sure that people aren't being evicted needlessly. It's one of those situations where we have to consult with our attorneys to make sure that what we're doing can actually work from a legal standpoint. Yeah. The landlord-tenant relationship is governed by state law, and we have to make sure that we aren't creating a problem that's bigger than the original problem by A, not being able to help anybody, and B, landing ourselves in court. So we will be looking at every option to make sure we help as many folks as we can, but we have to do it within the bounds of the law. Do you have any faith or confidence that the city of Dallas might get more money from the federal government anytime soon? 15 seconds left here. I'm hopeful. I've been advocating for that. Yeah. We want that money to come with more flexibility so that we can plug holes in our budget and not simply reimburse for COVID-related expenses. But you can never know and never really fully predict what Congress is going to do, but we're hopeful. All right, Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, good to see you again. We appreciate the time. Thank you, Jason. Good to see you too. Thank you. Wearing face masks during this pandemic has suddenly become a partisan issue. 2/3 of Democrats wear them, only half of Republicans do. We're going to look at the reasons why next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross is back. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer at WFAA in Dallas, is here as well. Ross, will start with you. And tomorrow, the governor is going to announce more businesses will be reopening. How would you rate the rollout so far? I think a lot of businesses are learning just because they're reopened doesn't necessarily mean the customers will be coming.
Well, right. And, a lot of the reopenings are partial. So you can only have 25% of your restaurant full. That's no way to run a restaurant. It's hard to run a movie theater with only 25% of the seats full. But it's better than nothing. And the early reports from the businesses is that they're slowly figuring it out. The governor might open some of them to 50%. We're gradually going into a more balanced set of restrictions against what's open, what's not open.
Yeah, but I want to ask about bar owners and live music venues. They are chomping at the bit to get reopened. How likely is that tomorrow?
Well, they're really trying. They're putting forth the Texas bar promise. They promised to do away with dance floors at open spaces, rope them off, cover it all with tables, serve only in plastic cups, keep tables, 6 to a table, 6 feet apart. They really want to be open. The governor said it's really going to be tough. Roger Williams in Congress wants there to be, federal and state money to support independent music venues, some sort of special carve out to allow music clubs to open.
Bernadine, anything about this so far surprising to you? I mean, the rollout seems like it's going okay. It's all really up to Texans about, whether they want to go out or not.
No, nothing is surprising me. I think that what you're seeing is the politics is coming into play, and that Abbott is making sure that he's opening those businesses so that, because we're going to have those bars, I think, real open. But we're going to have more businesses because he's getting more pushback.
Yeah.
And they're not going to stay closed long.
We also want to ask you about wearing masks. How in the world did this become a partisan issue?
It became it's a visual issue, so you can identify people, mask wearers and non-mask wearers, pretty easily. As the civil libertarians came into this argument and said, you're closing too many things, you're keeping individual rights down, the mask became a symbol of that. And the punishment for the masks in places like Laredo and Houston really set people off.
But 15 seconds left.
Well, Republicans want to make this all about personal responsibility. It'll backfire if the Democrats become the party of medicine.
And we'll wait and see what happens. We appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching as well. Inside Texas Politics back again next Sunday. Hope you can join us in and have a good day. Take care.